Ladies and gentlemen, please silence your phones and hush your babies. The show is about to start.
Hi everyone, and welcome to a special live show where we're talking about the thing that everyone's talking about, really, which is the church trying to build temples where people don't want them and trying to build them bigger than people want them to be. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. We're going to be quite quick about it. I'm going to try and summarize a timeline of everything that's been happening with these temples. So welcome one and all. There's people in the comments already. And I couldn't do this on my own. That would be wrong of me, particularly because Rebecca Biblioteca from Mormonish and Landon, her co-host, have been dealing with what's been going on in far more detail than I have. So I have brought Rebecca with me to help me fill in the gaps on the detail because I do macro and she'll do the micro, and together I think we'll get it all right. Does that sound good?
I think it's great. Thank you so much for inviting us. My co-host Landon would be here, but he's in the air right now flying to Japan. So his internet is not that good.
That's rather selfish of him, really, isn't it? To be taking a holiday when there's news to be discussed.
Not a holiday, unfortunately.
Or is it
Yeah,
not?
no, it's work related. Yeah.
Some of us have to go to Japan for work, right? You know,
that's it.
It's a difficult life, Landon, isn't it? But we're all rooting for you. I hope you have a great work trip. But I have Rebecca here, so all is not lost. I've got half the team still, so I think that's fine, right? We should do okay.
We're good to go.
Perfect. All right. So the joke that everyone's been making, that I've made, that Rebecca and Landon have made, is, does size matter? Because when it comes to church temples and the temples of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and their temples, apparently size does indeed matter, particularly when it comes to the large phallic object sticking out the top of the building. I'm just going to get that out there now. The phallic jokes will be made, and just I think if we get it all out there in the open, as it were, then I think we'll be okay to move forward. So these two temples, where are they, Rebecca?
The ones that we're going to be talking about today are in McKinney, Texas, although the town involved is actually Fairview. But it's called the McKinney, Texas. There's a few little towns right around, so a little confusing. The other one is in the Vegas area, Las Vegas, Nevada, and it's called the Lone Mountain Temple.
Which that one is the more egregious in some ways in terms of the landscape that it will be sort of dominating, because as a geological feature, that Lone Mountain Temple is something rather magnificent, I would say. But let's have a look at the timeline first of the McKinney Temple, as you said, located in Fairview. So on the 2nd of October 2022, Russell M. Nelson announced the Prosper, Texas Temple, did he not? And then they renamed it. Now, you've got some theories as to why that might be, Rebecca.
It is very odd. They did make that announcement, the Prosper Temple. I think maybe then they kind of went back to the drawing board and thought, Prosper, maybe not such a good look. Maybe it'll make people think of Ensign Peak, maybe the SEC fine. So then they decided to locate it in this town called Fairview. And as my co-host Landon pointed out, they're actually intending to obstruct the view. So maybe that title isn't very good. So then they settled on the pretty innocuous McKinney,
which is a city nearby, isn't it?
Yes.
Like Fairview is almost like a suburb of McKinney.
Yes.
Am I?
Yep.
I don't.
They're all
American
within.
geography, but yeah. Cool.
Yep.
That's good. Okay. So they changed it, and it was kind of a small announcement, 4th of December 2023. So that's a year and 2 months later, they announced, we've got a location, and it isn't where you all thought it would be. It's actually going to be in Fairview. And then they moved on pretty quick to start drawing up plans. Just 2 months, bringing us into February 2024. They started drawing up these lovely plans here. Kimley and Horn are the architects. Or Kimley Horn, I should say, are the architects. And you've got quite a big looking temple site there. And quite a tall looking temple. That looks a little bit like the Preston Temple, actually. In some ways, the temple in the north of England. But the Preston Temple, as far as I'm aware, doesn't have a spire of 173 foot and 8 inches. Is that correct, Rebecca? Is that how tall this one will be?
Yeah, this is definitely going to be at least twice as tall, if not 3 times as tall as any of the zoning codes in the area would allow.
Okay. I'm seeing Landon Brophy in the chat. Is that your Landon?
that must be. He must have the internet on the air. So go ahead and
my
ask him any
goodness.
questions.
Right. So he is with us in spirit,
There he
if
is.
not in video format. So
That's
okay, right, cool. He's in the chat because he's fancy and paying for Wi-Fi on his flight. I hope you're comping that to the company. That would be worth it. So then on the 7th of March, the church communications director writes to residents. And I think on the Fairview timeline, this is where the trouble starts, wouldn't you say, Rebecca?
Yeah, it definitely is.
So you sent me this, I believe. Did you send me this?
I did. I am working with the residents there in Fairview, and they had shared with me this letter. The first inkling that any of them received, legally, they have to send this out to everyone within 500 feet of the proposed location. So
Isn't
they
that
go to their
far?
mailbox. Yeah, they open it up, and here's this letter. Which, if you read it, it doesn't sound like there's anything wrong, really.
Mm-hmm. I mean, do you want to go ahead and read it, or shall I?
I think you're going to have to read it.
Okay,
This is
cool.
the running joke. My screen's about this big, so
Okay,
yeah,
right,
you're
no
gonna
worries
have to
then.
do all the heavy lifting on the reading.
That's fine. Okay. So it says, Dear neighbor, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints will be constructing the McKinney, Texas temple on an 8.16 acre site located at 671 East Stacy Road in Fairview, Texas. Now, already I don't like the use of presumptive language there,
Yes.
but I do that I used to do that when I would apply for jobs. You would do presumptive things to have people imagining. So I would ask potential employers things like, what does my first day at the job look like? And you use this sort of presumptive language to get them
Right.
imagining you already in the job, and then they're more likely to hire you. That was my thinking. And I wonder if a similar thing is happening here. If the church just says it as though it's going to happen and there's no argument to be made, then it will just happen. Right?
Yep, I'm sure so.
So it says, the church hopes you will share in its excitement about this sacred Christian building, which will be built to the highest standards of construction with beautiful landscaping. What do you think of them calling it a Christian building, Rebecca?
Well, I think that's a very calculated use of that word. And I don't believe they probably would have used that words in letters, maybe even 5 years ago. But now, of course, it's all things Christian. And we know that the LDS Church is doing a lot to appear more Christian. There are all kinds of things that we can name, crosses and Christian music. And so, again, this is just to make the neighbors think a Christian building, it's a church. It's just going to be a regular church building like the other churches in their area. Nothing different.
And I think what's interesting about the temple that's built in Birmingham, I don't have a picture here, but that's in a sort of more English parish church style. It's got almost quite a crucifix sort of shape, which, as we know, in the architecture of old churches in England and around the world, is such that they represent a cross from the air, and there is significance to the direction they're facing and all this sort of stuff. There's a lot of significance within the architecture, which doesn't really exist in Mormon temples. They don't have to face a certain direction. There used to be all those rumors, do you remember, about Moroni facing east, where Christ would come from? Was that it?
Yeah. Oh, that was not a rumor when I was growing up. That was an absolute fact. His trumpet
was it?
was pointing to where Christ was going to come back. Yes.
I remember an LDS Living, which I call LDS Living like the fifth horseman of the apostasy. Because LDS Living so often is on the money when it comes to like pointing out stuff that the church used to teach, which isn't actually true. Like LDS Living did a thing about which way do all the Moronis actually point, because it was a slow news day or whatever. But they're pointing out that this thing that was taught almost as gospel to some people just wasn't true. Yeah. So this, I think, is quite right. It's trying to get people to think that it's a Christian building and it's just like any other church. And they've said the temple will incorporate local architecture and themes in its design. Interesting. I'm not sure how. So it's complementary with the surrounding neighborhood. It's not, and we'll get to that, but it's definitely not complementary with the surrounding neighborhood. It is our hope it will be a community asset as an oasis of peace. Now, I have questions about how the community will use it as an oasis of peace, particularly because I think it's in the planning memorandum. They talk about how it will have highly manicured gardens for the patrons of the temple to enjoy. And that's specifically those going in. It doesn't mention anywhere that those gardens and grounds are for the community. So I wouldn't be surprised if the community can't even go on the grounds. And so at what point...
I made that suggestion to the residents that we're talking to. If it ever does get built, that you should just take a picnic and see what happens if it truly is an oasis.
Well, so the way it was in the UK, when I was at the London Temple, we would have garden tours for local groups, and the visitor centre there would take people on tours of the grounds and whatnot. And you kind of couldn't just turn up and walk around the grounds. It was Yeah, it's treated like the gardens of a private residence rather than it is an open sort of public park, as it were.
Correct. And I would say that the parking lot of 500 stalls is not necessarily an oasis. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I'd agree. Yeah. The London Temple has 32 acres of grounds, I think. So it's quite a big site there. So it was a real sort of, if you could walk out into the woods, which you often would, then you did get this real sense of peace. But this is just off a main road in about 8 acres. So it's not big enough. Anyway, plans call for a 2-story temple of approximately 43,200 square foot. Now, those 2 stories are taller than what the word stories would have people think. Is that so?
Yeah, yes, it is. I think it's a 35-foot height limit. And you think a story of just a regular 1-story building, but no, even just the 2 stories without the spire or the steeple still exceeds the codes that exist there now.
Yeah, it comes up to what, around 60 foot, something like that, or 40 foot.
Yep.
It's tall. So, and an accompanying small center to purchase religious items, garments, and house grounds maintenance, and will house grounds maintenance equipment. Okay, that's fine. Unlike a cathedral, the temple does not contain a large room for meetings. Instead, it is built with a series of smaller rooms where the highest ordinances of the faith take place by special appointment and exclusive appointment, that should say, because it's only available to certain people. Because of this, large numbers of people will not come to the neighborhood at the same time. I'd argue large numbers of people won't be coming at all because the church is in decline, but that's just me being snarky. We recognize that construction can cause some temporary challenges, and we thank you in advance for your patience. More presumptive language.
Exactly.
This is the key. Remember this, people. We'll come back to this. Please be assured that this project is consistent with city regulations. In fact, an official notice will be coming from the city informing you of the temple's construction. Again, they're making it sound like the city have given it the go-ahead almost.
Yep.
That's what some of this presumptive language indicates. Once the temple is completed, again, assuming it is, you will be among the first to be invited on a special tour before the public as a sign of goodwill. Oh, yay, how kind. Sorry, I'm feeling quite jaded tonight. I need to roll it back.
You are. Boy, you're taking it there already.
Yeah. As a sign of goodwill for your support during the building process. That's a cheap reward for giving up your skyline. The church desires to be a good neighbor and welcomes any questions or concerns you might have about the project. Please feel free to contact me anytime before or during construction. Melissa McKinney, and she's the church's communications director. Now, I've already put a short out about this, about how this letter is essentially a lie, but we'll pick up on this for now. The church desires to be a good neighbor. Well, you don't lie to your neighbors. And you don't tell them that a project that you have upcoming is consistent with city regulations when you are also at the same time applying for an exemption to those regulations. And this is from a local resident who's asked to remain anonymous, and that's fine. But they reached out and they said, every time I think I've heard all there is to hear about this proposed temple, something else comes up. This is incredibly misleading. They're talking about the letter I just shared. And Melissa continued to post misleading information on Nextdoor, which I think is a community forum, right? When I replied to her with screenshots of the proposal in the Fairview Memorandum, she hedged and said she'd shared what she knows and that I can ask Kimberly Horn reps about the particulars at the May 2nd meeting at the church leading up to the May 9th planning and zoning meeting. So the church is holding another open house. She said, oh, you can talk to the architects, talk to the construction people. No. Because, I don't know. What a poor excuse for a spokesperson to act like that if this is, what's gone down. But just talk to the architects.
I was going to say, I feel as a spokesperson, she knows temples are not 2 stories.
Yeah.
She knows temples are higher than that. And I have to say, the resident that I got this letter from that received it, he read it and he was like, okay, 2 stories. And the only thing that gave him a little concern is like, why is it 43,000 square feet of a 2-story building? He's thinking, what kind of complex is this? What is this exactly? But again, there wasn't a lot of alarm raised, just maybe a little confusion because it clearly said it's not going to, challenge any zoning regulations. It's going to be, follow the laws of the land. So they weren't too concerned. They were just a little confused by this letter, I think.
Yeah. But then, on the 2nd of April 2024, at least, because, and I'm being generous here because it was originally sent in March, but even on the 2nd of April, fine, that's after Melissa's letter, that's when this proposal was revised and submitted to the council, I think. So, or I could say council, that's a British way of saying it, to the planning and zoning people is the Americanism. But here it is from Kimley Horn, and it's kind of difficult to read, but the bit you want to really kind of look at is that on the right-hand side, it says variance 1 and 2, because they were asking for 2 variances from the standard building codes. Variance 1 is 65 feet to the top of parapet, 173 feet and 8 inches to the top of the spire. The current zoning allows for 35 feet or 2 stories, whichever is lower. Well, in this case, it's definitely 35 feet. But again, you see how the use of the language of 2 stories, even if someone looks at the zoning, they go, oh, okay, well, I've looked at the zoning and they say it's going to be 2 stories and 2 stories is allowed. So that's fine. Right. But no, that's not what's going on here. And we'll see later, the church tries to use other religious buildings as examples of why they should be given the exemption, but we'll get to that. Now, tell me if I'm wrong here, Rebecca. I think their request for variance 2 is perfectly legitimate, acceptable, and shouldn't cause anyone a problem. Because variance 2 is simply that when you're building something, they want landscaping setbacks between you and the next property. So like a buffer zone between you and the next property. On this one, they're saying, look, we're building next to our own stake center. So do we really need to buffer from our own property, particularly as they have a similar usage and people will be moving between the two?
Yeah, that's completely legitimate. And that's really not their focus. The focus is the height. And I will say, historically, as Mormonish Podcast has been following temples in Heber and Cody, this is always the issue, that they're trying to claim that the steeple, or as they call it, just spire, to make it sound like it's just, just a little afterthought tacked on, is not to be considered part of the building. And huge fight in Cody going on right now over this with the zoning boards and city councils. So all of this is no new news to those of us that watch what they're doing and the playbook they use.
If it's not to be considered part of the building, do what you've done on other temples and put it on the floor next to it.
Yes.
If it's not to be considered part of the building, don't attach it to the building. Would be my argument there. So that's I just wanted to point that out here, and I want to not be accused of you just don't want them to have anything. No, I'm saying they can have variance 2. That seems perfectly reasonable to say we don't need to have a setback from our own building. That seems more than fine. But to say you want a spire that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 times, almost 6 times, 5 or 6 times taller than the allowance for buildings in the area, mental. It's crazy. And they sent a memorandum to the planners. Here you go, explaining what they wanted. And here's where I said up on the top right, provide a park-like setting for temple patrons, not for the public. Yeah. The temple will just provide it for the patrons. And the building heights are currently limited to 35 feet. And they give a list of these here. Their proposed temple would be 107 to the top of the steeple, 173.8 to the top spire. So that's a 60-something foot spire. Okay. Then they talk about, the Faith Anglican Church has a 48-foot bell tower. So why can't we have a 173-foot spire? The LDS chapel next door has a 68-foot spire. Why can't we have a 173-foot? Creekwood United Methodist Church in 2006 put a height of 153-foot bell tower, 154-foot bell tower, and then a redesign in 2017, and this is key, 51-foot spire. Yeah. And then the Fairview water towers and the radio towers and the town hall. Imagine having the gall to come into a town and go, you know what? I want my building to be bigger than the town hall. It needs to be bigger and more important than the town hall.
That's right. That's right. And what I think is interesting is when the residents finally mobilize, and in McKinney, they got wind of some of the schematics, and then the residents were like, what is happening? So things that the residents in these towns draft up to try to show, they don't just list things out, they make schematics. So you can see what you're reading this, you go, wait, 51, 173, what's the difference? The residents make it very clear. Look, here's a picture of our water tower. here's the temple next to it. I mean, when you see it visually, you understand what you're talking about. And that's a problem in all of these places, getting the residents to understand what is really happening and that they need to mobilize, because it's hard to fathom just how big these things are. And we're going to talk about it a little bit later in Lone Mountain, what they actually did to help people understand how tall they're asking for.
Now, I apologize, everyone. I thought I'd muted my microphone, but it appears I just chewed in your ear. So enjoy the
You're making me
ASMR.
hungry. I'm going to take a big old slurp of my drink right now.
Yeah. Welcome, though. Tonight's episode is not sponsored, but brought to you by Candy Kittens, sour watermelon flavored gourmet sweets, London. So
You have all the best snacks over there. I love kittens and I love candy. You need to send me a care package.
I'll send you some. Yeah, I will send you a care package of sweets. So apologies, everyone, for that. I will try to mute my microphone when I need to take a snack. But let's move on to the to this here, which the staff comments. This is key, because anyone trying to say, oh, they just don't want the church to have a temple, they're being mean to the church. Staff is supportive of the site and landscape development plans. However, the proposed height is quite taller than anything previously approved by the town. As such, staff considers the proposed height of the main building to be a policy decision by town council. That's fair enough. Don't you agree?
I do. And we say this over and over when we're podcasting about temples. All the cities that I deal with on Mormonish, Cody, Heber, Lone Mountain, McKinney, all of them welcome a temple, an LDS temple in their community. They respect the members. They respect their ability to worship as they see fit. They would like their buildings to follow the laws of the land and be built in a place that zones appropriately. But they welcome a temple, every single resident I've ever talked to.
Yeah. Now, I want to hear from one of those residents, because we had the 11th of April Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. So this is about a month after these letters have been sent out. I'm going to try and get this right. So let's see if I can move this to the right spot. There we go.
Less than a week ago, I found out about the temple planned to go into the RE1 zoned area along Stacy Road. And since this is going to be a big thing over the next month, I think it's at this time that I really want to implore you to keep at the forefront of your mind that this land is zoned RE1. And the purpose of the zoning is to protect the residents. When an entity applies for a conditional use permit in an area zoned RE1, the only thing that protects the residents is the Planning and Zoning Committee. So you are everything to us at this time. Please consider with any conditional use permit, it must abide by the existing height and lighting restrictions. It must not damage or worsen drainage or traffic flow. It's got to be architecturally harmonious with the existing residential areas. And then finally, another thing that you should consider, even though this is a religious facility and they are granted conditional use permits, this is a residential area zoned RE1. Any religious facility should serve the residents. It should serve residents and maybe nearby town members, maybe people from Allen or McKinney. The proposed temple is going to be a hub for the region. It's going to bring in people from all over North Texas, potentially thousands of non-residents to an area that is zoned RE1. That's all I have to say. So please, over the next month, please think about these things. They mean so much to us and our property values.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Please consider that we are not taking comment.
I can be heard. Right. So thank you very much for taking the time to listen to that. I thought it was really important to hear a resident speak out. And these are public meetings available online. RE1, for those, had some people asking in the comments, someone saying it stands for residential 1 acre. But we don't have zoning in the UK in the same way that you have it in the States, because our towns are so old and have kind of built up in this hodgepodge but we have protected areas and we have other things to kind of point out where people should construct. What did you make of her comments, Rebecca?
Well, I have heard this speech over and over from the residents that we are working with on Mormonish and Heber and Cody and Lone Mountain and McKinney. It's the same kind of speech. These residents are educated. They are passionate. They're also compassionate about, finding a way so that everybody can win here. But these are their properties. Zoning protects them. That's why they bought there. That's why they built there. And they're trying to, I love how she said it, you are our only defense against this. You need to uphold the laws of the land, if I can keep using that jargon, from the Article of Faith. And this happens over and over. And that's why they say there are so many locations where the church could build and nobody would bat an eye. And I guarantee there are temples all over where they do build and there's nothing like this. But every time they come into an area like this, where it's already zoned, the residents live there, never imagining that something could change so drastically, the temple comes in, the church comes in, and it applies for all of these exceptions and zoning code changes. And that's where you run into trouble. So it's almost heartbreaking to me because I've heard this so often. And I've also worked with residents who are literally shut down at city council meetings, especially when there's a huge LDS component there, and almost not even allowed to speak or ask, why are you speaking? So it's really emotional for everybody. This is where you live. This is the investment into your home. It's kind of hard to hear, but this captures exactly what's happening.
And the church here cannot play the same games. They cannot come in and bully a local authority because we have so much. We invented red tape when it came to planning, I'm pretty sure.
Thank God.
Well, for people that like Top Gear and Jeremy Clarkson and are aware that Jeremy Clarkson owns a farm, he owns a farm in the county where I live, and the county council of where I live, he's in what we call an area of outstanding natural beauty. So it's very difficult to build and change things there. He wanted to put a car park in for his little farm shop that he was allowed to have. They wouldn't let him put a car park in. It had to be gravel because that would encourage more people to come and that would make the roads more busy. People started parking on the roads, so passive aggressively they started putting no parking cones down the side. The council just came in. Watch his show. He talks all about it, but they wouldn't get away with that, and they aren't getting away with it with the Birmingham temple. Residents have concerns and they are heard and listened to.
Wow.
And the church hasn't come in with a ridiculous height for this temple. The Birmingham temple, it's looking local, or it's looking like a British temple would. It's got local architectural features, certainly reminders of British architecture and British parish churches, etc. The only concern they have there is there enough parking? The church is going to try and argue that they have enough. I don't think they do, but ultimately I think it will get passed and the residents' concerns will be heard. And if people don't want it built, it won't get built. It will be as simple as that. If the people don't want it, they will fight it and they will be listened to. So I'm just really sorry to see this happening differently in the States.
Less than a week ago.
Right. So the church requested a delay. And they've done this in Lone Mountain and in McKinney. They like their delays, don't they, the church? They like to kind of drag things on.
It's actually kind of unprecedented in the other churches or the other temple situations I follow. And I feel honestly that because the residents were able to mobilize so quickly, get together and organize in Lone Mountain and McKinney, I feel that that's why the delay was requested. I feel it was requested to mobilize the Latter-day Saints there and to just try to figure out what's happening, because so quickly these residents were able to get together, start finding out what was going on at the city level. They were able to put together packets. They were able to talk to other residents. And that doesn't always happen because a lot of things the church does, as we'll see in some slides coming up, happen way before residents are even aware as far as changing codes and zoning. And in this case, these residents were on top of it quickly. And I would like to say that I believe they are standing on the shoulders of Cody and Heber, because some of the residents expressed to me, I was able to Google and kind of look at what had happened in other cities, and they saw and they learned and they started acting very quickly.
Ruth Heath said here, a delay helps to disrupt the momentum of
Mhm.
local activism,
Yep.
which I think is a really good point there. Almost the next day, or within a couple of days, certainly, the church began to mobilize members after asking for a postponement by sending letters out to the Frisco. This one was sent to Frisco. You had one on your podcast that was sent to which stake?
Sherman State.
Sherman.
Yeah,
Okay,
two different
so-
stakes. And our residents are like, those are like 25 miles away. Why are they involved? Not understanding the structure, how the LDS church works,
Yeah,
not
there's
understanding
5 stakes.
exactly. There's a temple district, and that means that people from miles away, that woman at the council meeting was not incorrect. There will be people coming from all over to this temple. They'll be in what's called the temple district. So
Mhm.
yes, 25 miles away in Frisco, or maybe it was Sherman that was 25 miles away.
Yep.
But anyway, Sherman and Frisco, not right next door, but farther away.
And it says Frisco will be one of 5 stakes assigned to the new district. So that is a lot of people that are going to be following this message, because we can assume that this was sent to the other 3 stakes as well, if it was sent to Frisco and Sherman. And given that the area authority elder Jonathan Cannon is the one that brought that, and the area communications committee, which Melissa McKinney very likely sits on or heads up. We don't know exactly what she does, but there was an attached letter, which is, brothers and sisters, we've been asked to help support the approval of the plan to build the McKinney, Texas temple. And I've gone over this, but we'll go over it briefly now. They've been invited. Hang on. It doesn't have to be long. Brief is actually better. Be sincere and share from the heart. We don't want these scripted. Then they say, exactly. We would invite you to email planning manager Israel Roberts in the following pattern. Now, tell me the difference between a pattern and a script, Rebecca.
Tomatoes, if I can use exactly. Yeah, I just love that.
So.
Please put this in your own words so it doesn't look, like we're all following some script. But yeah, it definitely is very specific about what they would like the members to share with the planning board.
Please put this in your own words in the following manner. Is essentially the gist of this. So subject line, resident in support for those who live in Fairview, or neighbor in support for those who live in a nearby town who are in the temple district. So neighbor in support could be from 25, 30 miles away, as we've seen.
I heard that someone in Arkansas said that they got this letter. What? So I don't know how big this temple district is, but this letter was circulating.
It does go into the corner of other states, I've heard. So that could make sense. Then they say, in your email, you could answer a couple of the following questions. Why? And then they don't actually, the first thing isn't a question, it's a statement of someone's feelings. Why you're excited for and support a temple in Fairview, and what it will mean to you personally and allow you to worship God / practice your faith. That's very important. A lot of this is couched in language that's trying to dog whistle the First Amendment and make it all about religious observance. How houses of worship in a community benefit the whole community. Well, there's an old fair study that says they do, but no one else really seems, when it comes to temples particularly. But they're talking about houses of worship, which is going to make people think of, community buildings like a chapel or a normal church. How the temple helps those who attend to be better people and improve their lives, and therefore improve the community, how it will bless your family. So they want them to tell them that, if I go to the temple, I won't play loud music after 11 p.m. or something. What argument are they expecting them to make?
But I live 40 miles away. So.
Yeah. So it's like, I coming in from 40 miles away will be a better member of your community for the hour that I'm here, and then drive off in my truck again, right? I'll buy gas at your local gas stations.
Exactly. To call themselves a community center is so misleading, because again, these residents don't know. Most of them have never seen a temple. Some of them have never heard of the LDS church. And so when they hear community center, they think, so maybe this will be open. Maybe there'll be like a craft bazaar, or maybe it'll be something my Girl Scout troop can, like you would do with other religious buildings. They do not understand. One of the residents in Heber said it perfectly. They said, I've studied this now. I understand. It's not a church. It's not even your own members can all go in. It's a private club. It needs to be zoned as a private club. She saw it very clearly when she started to study it.
Absolutely. And that's some arguments I've been making about the church here in the UK, is that they get a tax exemption on temples currently, which I don't think they deserve, because it's essentially a private members club. It does no community charitable benefit. I've done a video on that. Go and check that out on my channel. It'll be in the temples playlist.
Yeah.
and you pay to get in.
Mhm.
You pay to get in. Only those that pay can get in. That is a paid members club.
Yep.
It's as simple as that. It may as well be a country club. So while we want you to express your feelings in your own words, why is there a caveat to that? Some key concepts would be helpful to the approval process. A key message needs to be on the importance of the temple and how it allows you to worship as you choose, to practice your faith, and that the building itself is a symbol of your faith, including the steeple if you feel to be specific in that regard. Talk about leading the witness. The height of the steeple is part of our religious observance. The steeple is the temple's most distinctive architectural feature and serves no other purpose than to send a religious message. Steeples point toward heaven and serve the purpose of lifting our eyes and thoughts toward heaven. The steeple expresses a message of faith and devotion to God. Does it, Rebecca? I want you to talk on this for a few minutes.
Oh my goodness. The steeple. And I just laugh every time I hear it, even though I've heard it and read it so many times. So there's a larger picture to this whole steeple thing. The first time I ever became aware of this is when the residents in Cody, Wyoming that we were working with texted us one day and said, "Are there any temples with domes on them?" Which I thought was an unusual question. And I said, "Of course there are temples with domes on them. There's, maybe like 10 or some." And there's a law called RLUIPA, the Religious Land Use and Incarcerated Persons Act. It's an act. It was actually proposed by LDS senators Hatch Bennett, Utah, and Oregon Senator Smith back in 2000, right around the time the Boston Temple was having some legal issues trying to put their steeple up. The Boston Temple was actually dedicated without a steeple and operated a year without. So that was in place just 20 years ago. And we just all recently realized that it was put in place by lawmakers from Utah. So this says that if a part of a building is integral to your religious worship, you cannot worship without it. There's no zoning code. There's nothing any city council can do can stop you from building it. And as my co-hosts like to say, this is to shield religions where there might be somebody who is prejudiced against that religion and says, you can't build that here. We don't want you here. It is to shield religions. However, in this case, the church, go ahead.
Sorry, for example, with a mosque, a minaret is essential to a mosque because it's used to call people to prayer.
Yep.
Right? It serves a function. It needs to be there. I mean, there are ways of having a mosque without a very tall minaret and using speaker systems, etc. But a traditional mosque, the minaret is so someone can stand up at the top and call people to prayer. That is a good use of that protection for a religion that does get discriminated against when they want to try and put a building in town.
Yep. No, that's a perfect example. And that's what this act is all about. And the incarcerated persons part is you can't stop someone who's incarcerated from practicing their religious beliefs too. It's a shield to protect people as they worship. And that's how it should be used. However, the LDS Church is using it as a sword against these towns. So as we talked about before, the main problem they're running into is the steeple, spire, tower, whatever you want to call it, the giant thing erected on top of their buildings. So in Cody, they really fought them on that. They said, you have other buildings that have domes. You cannot claim that you can't practice your religion without the steeple. So I feel like in both McKinney here, where they said it out loud by sending these letters, and in Lone Mountain, they're like, we got to figure out a way to make this an absolute, the most important part of worship. We cannot perform the ordinances, the things we need to do. We cannot practice our religious rites without the steeple. And so here they are adding this language. But if you were to talk to anybody in the LDS Church who has not been made aware of this scenario and said, how important is the steeple height in your worship? Everyone would say, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Yeah, they've never heard that before. But once they can get this into the language, and I predicted that there'll be a couple talks, maybe some devotionals where this is mentioned, then legally they can point to it and say, see, here it is. This is a major tenet of our religion. So this is just a beginning of trying to get this introduced into the dialogue.
Then what we will need to see is that the Mesa, Arizona temple, the Paris, France temple, the Leh, Hawaii temple, the Cardston, Alberta temple, all have spires retroactively added to them. And it's going to create a nightmare in other countries such as Copenhagen in Denmark, where they have a detached spire currently. And what are they going to have to do now? Put that on top? They'd be lucky to get that past Danish planning law.
Exactly. And what about all the ordinances performed? I feel like they may have to be re-performed. Were you married in the Copenhagen temple? I don't know.
But that
Might not be valid.
that deals with the problem of running out of names to do baptisms in the baptistry, because they're all going to have to be redone now.
Everyone's going to have to be redone. That's right. So yeah, it's a hot mess. Let's just say that. But they absolutely need that to be there so that they can go into any town and they can say, look, RLUIPA, Religious Land Use and Incarcerated Persons Act, allows us to have the steeple, which we cannot worship in the way that we legally should be able to without the height of the steeple.
Which is just nonsense. Entirely so. So yeah. I wanted to point that, and if anyone in the chat knows of a local newspaper that'd be willing to take this story or has any contacts with this story, put me in touch. I've written an opinion piece that I will offer to the highest bidder. No, I'll give it to you for free, but free of charge, I should say, not for free. I can't give you free. Sorry. So yeah, I've written an opinion piece on this, laying out the argument against this idea in great detail. Including the idea that churches started work on modular temples, etc., and so this might be a problem with that, and all these sorts of arguments. But we'll come to some great arguments now that have been laid out for us by here's my response to the church's letter.
Your response was great. Yeah,
I sent this to the planning officer. I'll just read it real quick. This is going to be a slightly longer live stream tonight, but I think it's important. Dear Mr. Roberts, I'm sure by now you've no doubt received many emails of support for the application of the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints to build a temple in your area. The church has instructed members attached to do this and have made it clear to the members the points they would like to see included. So I sent him the receipts and I was like, look, this is what they're sending to people in the area. So just so you know, the stuff you're getting coming from the locals isn't exactly coming of their own free will and volition. They're being told to by the church. The church is suggesting it to them, which in the LDS church is as good as telling them, frankly. One of these points centers around the height of the steeple. As a member of the church myself, my understanding is that the height of the steeple is not religiously necessary for the religious observance of temple worship. That's a redundant use of religiously there. My apologies. I'll write it better next time. For example, the Paris, France temple and the Mesa, Arizona temple have no steeples at all. And others, such as the Copenhagen, Denmark temple, have detached steeples. So while it is the church's preference to have a tall steeple, and sometimes multiple steeples, they cannot argue that this is an essential element of the temple's function as a religious structure, and nor therefore is the height of said steeple an essential part of Latter-day Saint religious observance. The church has received recent public pushback on the height of their proposed steeples on the Cody, Wyoming and Lone Mountain, Nevada temples. That is the likely cause of their desire to have local church members reach out and make claims around the necessity for a tall steeple as connected to their religious observance. However, to make such claims, in my view, creates a connection between the height of the steeple and religious observance, which then allows any request to reduce the steeple height to be painted as assaults on the religious freedom of church members. This is simply not the case, as members can and do successfully perform religious worship in temples with no steeple at all. Best wishes, Nemo. So let them know about that. Yeah, they know now, and I think this has become clear to them.
I hope it has. And I feel like you're called to larger news outlets to look at this. It is a very interesting story with a lot of twists and turns. And like I said, as we recently found out, it goes back 2 decades to this act, this RLUIPA passed by LDS senators in the wake of problems with the Boston temple. So the ground was laid a long time ago. It really is a big story that somebody needs to dig in. It is extremely interesting.
Yeah, but the church didn't learn its lesson, because on the 18th of April, they sent out an almost identical letter to residents again from Melissa McNeely again. And it is exactly the same, except for they've missed out the bit where they said that the church will be, that the city council will be sending out a notification of the construction of the temple. That's not there this time now. But they're still saying, please be assured that this project is consistent with city regulations. After the members now know that there's been exemptions asked for. It just isn't consistent with city regulations. The church has asked for an exemption based on bad evidence. Now, this was sent in by a viewer who is on the ground and has sent some information here. But the Creekwood United Methodist Church tower that the church has cited at 154 foot as being the reason they should get to have a 173 foot tall spire. Sorry, 173 foot and 8 inches. The 8 inches do matter. Sorry, I'll stop with that. The conclusion that this person has made is a maximum of 68-foot tower feature height is the tallest approved height found so far for a valid conditional use permit for a religious facility. And whose building is that on? Well, that's on the meeting house. It's going to be next to the temple. So the 68-foot tall spire on the stake center on Stacy Road is the tallest religious building in town. So the church has already got the tallest religious building around.
They already have it.
So according to that act that I can never pronounce that you've talked about, Lupa, what that says, as far as I understand, is that if the church is treated given less than another religious institution, they can sue the city. And if they're given more than another religious institution, those other religious institutions can sue the city, right, for being discriminated against, or the church for being discriminated against. So the way to stop anyone suing anyone is to give the church the exact amount that's already been approved, the highest approval that's been given for anyone, which is the church themselves. So they doubly can't claim any persecution because they're already the benefactors of the largest exemption in town, and they would get another very large exemption, 3 foot taller than the next one, the Friendship Baptist Church, the add-on that they put on, right?
Yep. And
that
again,
seems fair to me.
Well, and you're not seeing the schematics. What they're asking for is so beyond what these other buildings have. You have to see it to really understand what they're asking for.
And then they're talking about and I try to remember if I included those comparisons. I'm not sure. We'll go through and we'll see. If not, I can post them on my Instagram and see if we can find them there. But the other buildings, apart from religious buildings that they were using to try and justify, you can see the table there that we saw earlier, is the Fairview water towers at 140 to 150 foot. So still 23 foot and 8 inches smaller than the temple would be.
Yeah.
And they have to be tall because they use gravity to bring people water.
Exactly.
Right? There's no way of getting around that. The Highway 5 radio tower, imagine going, I want to build a really big building, and the only thing I could find to compare it to that's equally as tall is a radio tower. And it's still 15 feet or thereabouts. No, 10 feet. Sorry. I'm struggling to read these numbers. 10 feet shorter than the thing you plan to build, which means it could, in theory, block radio signal.
Yeah.
Because it's taller. Then you have a 64-foot Fairview town hall. Again, you want to build something that is almost 3 times as tall as the town hall of the town. There's no need to flex like that. There's no need to try and assert yourself like that as a religion. There's just no need to try and be the tallest show in town in what is a very low town to begin with.
Yeah, and unfortunately, this happens everywhere. In Heber, it's going to be so tall, and this is Heber Valley Temple in Utah, and it's going to be so tall, and it's in the path, a flight path to the airport. And so they're going to have to put flashing red lights. I don't know if Moroni will be holding those little sticks, but they're going to have to put some kind of flashing red indication on the top of the spires because it's that tall. It's going to interfere with aircraft.
Moroni, the red-nosed reindeer.
Maybe that's what it is. Beep, beep.
It'll be a permanent Christmas light show.
You just say why. There are other areas where there's zoning that can accommodate. It's still weird, but there are other areas in all these places that can accommodate the buildings in the proper zone. I just don't understand it.
Now, so this is the United Methodist Church. I think that's what UMC is standing for. I could be wrong. But that's this tower that the church is using to say that, we should get a tall tower too. But this was never built. This was rejected in 2006. This was rejected 18 years ago. And the church is like, oh no, that's why we should get something tall. And then this is just further proof that Creekwood UMC didn't get their tall tower. They got a bell tower of 51 foot instead, and that was approved 11 years later because they basically got told you can build the first bit and then we'll decide on the tower at a later time so you can crack on. And it took 11 years to get a tower of 51 feet approved.
Yeah, and they've tried this in Cody, Wyoming. There was a school that had a bell tower on it. Mormonish took a road trip there. We actually wanted to see the bell tower and see what was happening. And it's, it's high, but it's connected to the school and it's very small. I swear it's probably like just, it's nothing. Nothing compares to a temple steeple. That is something different. It's a tower. It's not what they're comparing it to. It's apples and oranges, tomatoes, tomatoes.
And so now the church is holding a open house on the 2nd of May to try and I don't know, chummy up to the locals and try and show them how it won't be all so bad and whatnot. And then the planning and zoning meeting at 7 p.m. Mark your calendars, 9th of May at Fairview Town Hall. Be there or be square. No, I won't be there. I did look at flights. I thought, I wonder if I should fly out to Texas and
I felt the
just
same way.
go get involved and
you
help
know,
them. But then I realized something very important is that the Americans dumped all our tea in the harbor. They kicked us out. And that's the Americans. Texans, I have no doubt they will absolutely stand up for themselves, and they don't need
Yes,
my
they will.
help.
Yep.
They do not need my help to
Yeah.
stand up for themselves. So if I know one thing about Texas, is that you don't mess with Texas. So,
But they do
in
need
Nevada,
media coverage. So what you're doing is great. Getting the word out there, that does help. It absolutely does.
but they're all soft in Nevada. They're all. I didn't say that.
That's it exactly. That's the problem. So
No,
and I've
the
tried to
Nevada
talk to these
locals are being tough
residents.
too.
I've tried to talk to them in McKinney about what to expect at these city council meetings. And if Heber and Cody are any example, the LDS members will be asked to show up. They will
Mhm.
show up en masse, and they will monopolize the time at the council meetings, basically bearing the testimony of the temple, my ancestors in persecution in temple. And then the residents will get up armed with zoning codes and laws and rules and tax, just all these kinds of documents. They'll know their stuff. The residents will talk about feelings, and it'll just go on and on like that. So
Yeah, unfortunately.
yeah.
But I my prediction moving out of this, just before we go into the Lone Mountain Temple, and I think you'll see the reason for my prediction. And I sent you this in a text earlier,
Mhm.
Rebecca, and you said
Yeah.
the same thing. So I think we're on the money. Is that Fairview, the church will compromise. They will have to bring the height down, and they will work with the city, and they'll get a temple, but they'll compromise. But
Mhm.
Lone Mountain, I feel like, is a lost cause already. I feel like this one will happen, and it's going to be a real shame.
Well, and I feel that may be the case simply because the church has been interfering in the city government much earlier than we even imagined. I just got some information today about them trying to change codes even earlier than we thought. So these things happen behind the scenes before residents are even aware, before they even receive a letter. Codes are changed, zoning is changed. And in this case, this has happened in Lone Mountain, as you'll find out, where it hasn't happened yet in McKinney. And I think that's why they're saying it's a little bit of a different, a different scenario in each town.
I get a different feel. And this is, what have you called it? A tale of two temples? And I'm getting
I
that.
used to call it a tale of two temples when we were only covering Cody and Heber. Now it's a hot mess of 4 temples. Bakersfield, California they're just doing this everywhere. It's when you look at the big picture, you just can't understand why.
Yeah. Just want to say thank you to Carl Barry for that kind donation. And this is the point of the show where inevitably I tell people, hey, hi everyone. I'm supported by donations and by the kind help of all those who support me. So there is a donor box link in the description. Becoming a monthly donor really helps because it helps me plan out content through the year because I know how much I'm getting month on month. I've got some really exciting content planned for this year. I do plan to travel around quite a bit and get out of this studio and see a few places. I would like to try and get to America this year, get out there and make some interesting videos. So any support is welcome. Thank you very much. I'll stop rattling my little tin now for coins, and we will move on to the Lone Mountain Temple, which again was announced on the 2nd of October 2022, but Russell M. Nelson announced it as Lone Mountain, and there is the view from the summit of Lone Mountain. And there is the view from the summit of Lone Mountain with the new temple. That's my very rough Photoshop of the temple. However, someone has taken the temple and made it a to-scale 3D model in Google Earth and is showing...
And this is a person who does this for a living. So this is accurate because we've taken flack on Mormonish before for doing that, plopping a temple down, and people are saying that's not proportionally correct. This, what you're seeing right here, is this is someone who does this for a living.
213 feet tall or whatever it would be, right?
Yeah.
So that's what we would be seeing, and they've done it from another perspective as well. So look at that, right?
Yep.
That mountain there in the background stands away from the rest of the range. That's why it's called Lone Mountain. It's a very interesting geological feature. I find it quite beautiful. I can understand why the residents really love to look up at that mountain. It must be quite impressive standing over their town. Everything is tall in respect of that mountain. And then just right there, right in front of it, you can just see is that little eyesore just covering up some of the mountain. It just feels wrong. It just feels wrong for the temple to impose upon God's creation, if you want to look at it that way.
The true temple, right? Nature.
Right? Yeah,
a lot
nature.
of people feel that way.
So the church may want to be avoiding the appearance of evil. That's what I've called this section here, because as Rebecca mentioned, there seems to be some financial jiggery-pokery going on. I'm going to be very careful how I talk about this, because I don't want to be sued for libel, and I cannot accuse the church of directly interfering with the town council. I want to make that very clear, or city council. But what we have seen is on this neighborhood meeting poster here, people are instructed to contact Ann Pierce at Camphor Crowell law firm with any questions about the construction of the temple. The church is employing Camphor Crowell law firm as kind of part of their team for making this happen in Nevada. Now, some residents sent Councilwoman Alan Palensky a letter pointing out some things they'd noticed from publicly available documents and donation records, campaign donation records. They said, also have noticed the fact that you have accepted $10,000 in contributions from the law firm Camphor Crowell that is representing the developer, the church. These donations occurred the same year the property was acquired by the developer, $2,500 on the 14th of June 2022. Why do Americans write the date weird? $3,000 on the 9th of September 2022 and $4,500 on the 2nd of December 2022. Along those same lines, it appears Councilman Knudsen, Councilwoman Seaman, Councilwoman Diaz, and Councilman Creer have all accepted contributions totaling $60,000 from the previously mentioned law firm. In total, the councillors received $70,000 from this single law firm, which again represents the church here, 40,000 of that occurring either right before the land purchase or right after. And then they ask her to have a look into some potential conflicts of interest, etc. But to be clear, what we are not saying is the church instructed the law firm to make those donations. We cannot say that. We cannot prove that. We cannot suggest that. But the question I want to ask is, does it seem right? Is it right to you in the comments? Please let me know what you think in the comments. Is it right that the law firm that represents the church in this matter has made donations to the officials responsible for making the planning decisions? Is that right? Does that seem right to you? I don't know, but I want to ask the question. What are your thoughts on that, Rebecca?
Yeah, this is a very interesting scenario. And again, we have no idea what it means. All we know is that campaign contributions are public record. And so we can see those there. I did find out earlier today that the church had applied to make a certain zoning change that would be needed to get the temple through earlier in the year, and it had been denied. Then it looks like these contributions from a law firm were made for whatever reason, and then that zoning went through. So we don't know what it means at all.
So correlation does not equal causation. That is very important.
We don't know. We have no idea.
We're just pointing to a seeming correlation here. Some things happened in sequence. There you go. That we have to be very careful what we say here, and we are not suggesting that there's any foul play going on in any way. We're just pointing out what's happened and asking if that seems right. And this is why I talk about the appearance of evil, because it could all be entirely above board, but it doesn't look good. And the church shouldn't want this look either. The church shouldn't want this to be the way it looks at all. The church should be mad with the law firm that is representing them for giving those donations, because they should be like, well, what are you doing? This makes us look bad.
Yeah.
If the church was completely ignorant of it, and this is the first the church is hearing of it, the Strengthening Church Members Committee spies watching this video now, they report back and they go, did you know about this? If that's the case, the church should be up in arms and going, no, and making statements. We did not tell them to make those donations at all. We do not want this to look like anything untoward. at all. So the church should be coming out and properly distancing itself from this, because, you know, they if they're innocent in it, which I have to assume that they are. So anyway, that's my way of not getting sued. Let's move along. The church rallies members for public support on the 31st of March 2024. And they did it in slightly different ways this time, which I want to get your thoughts on this, Rebecca, because this hasn't been talked about yet, has it? This is the petition.
Yeah, not at all.
No, not at all. Okay, so I just got sent this recently by someone who received this, the Nevada Red Rock Stake. Dear brothers and sisters, as we have entered into a public comment period regarding the Lone Mountain Temple, many have asked about ways we can encourage public support for the Lone Mountain Temple. In that regard, please see some ideas in the attached document. While we invite supporters to speak up, no one should feel compelled to offer support. Please remember the importance of expressing support in a kind and neighborly manner without being combative. Or combative, that's weird. It is not necessary to respond to negative comments that will be made, and it may be better to just ignore them. What is important is that succinct positive messages are posted. Thank you in advance for your support and engagement on this important issue from the Red Rock Stake Presidency. And then here is their list of how to show support for the Lone Mountain Temple. And they say that, you know, can submit a response to public comment page at the City of Las Vegas form stack. Social media is very important. So follow your elected officials on social media pages. Look for ways to express support for the temple. Yes, all this sort of stuff. Speak to local news, Fox 5, Channel 8. They've been running stories. Go comment on their stories. Speak to the local news. Interesting, particularly Francis Allen Polensky's Facebook page. Go follow her on Facebook. The woman who received $10,000 from the church's law firm that's representing them here at this time. Yeah, I'm being corrected by Doug Vincent. It's combative. I've always said it differently. Anyway, what are your thoughts on this way of them getting to show support? So I can be quiet for a second.
Yeah. Well, again, this is the same kind of letter that we saw in McKinney, but there is no mention of the steeple height. So they hadn't quite come up with that yet, but it definitely puts all the links in one place. It tells you who to contact. It gives you the email addresses. Same thing happened in Cody and Heber, the very same thing, how to mobilize everybody. And it's so interesting how it says, you know, ignore negative comments. Well, negative comments, in my experience, are simply questions about zoning and codes and the law. They're not negative comments. They're not saying Mormons go home. They're simply saying, you know, what about this code? How are you trying to change this? What is happening? So this is just part of the course that they run, you know, really gets involved. It's fun to me how the church will come out and say, social media, be careful, beware. But in a situation like this, they really want to teach you how to be an activist, basically. So this is your playbook for how you go out and get involved. And I've been on these, I know these Facebook pages for Heber and Cody, you know, and it's boy, it can get really ugly there as the, you know, residents who are trying to just what's going on, and the LAS on there, you know, and I said this at all towns apart that we have seen, and that is the most heartbreaking part. But yep, these letters are sent out everywhere and just say get involved with the agenda of making sure that you protect the temple and the right to build it wherever they want.
Yeah, so I think your sound just cutting out a little bit there, but that's fine. Ruth Heath has just pointed to what I was going to point to. Activism. Corbett enters the chat. Ahmed Corbett gave a talk absolutely decrying activism, but, you know, only activism towards the church. Other activism's fine. Yeah, so sorry. As Doug Vincent pointed out, the Strengthening Church Members Committee is jamming this broadcast, but we broadcast nonetheless. They will not silence us. So let's move on to the church postponing the planning meeting. And I've got a couple of clips here from 8 Now, the local news provider. And I think these are important, and these are included for commentary and critique. And we will be commentating on them and critiquing them. So 8 News, don't you dare try and demonetize me. But if they do try and demonetize me, you know how to support me financially. It's in the description. So let's check this out, because this is important to the story.
New tonight, it's a story you heard first on 8 News Now. A community divided about a Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints temple being built up in the Northwest Valley. As 8 News Now reporter James Schaefer explains, there's changes on the timeline and new information from the city of Las Vegas. Here's James.
The community again says they have no dispute at all with those of LDS faith, but both they and church members saying they are now learning about this new meeting date regarding the construction, and there's more. A historic document now at the center of this debate.
I need to pause him there because I feel old, because I feel like I'm definitely older than that guy, and he's a newscaster.
Exactly.
Right? It's like when
Yep.
missionaries start looking young to you. You're like,
Yep.
oh no, I've been back a while. Anyway, let's
Yep.
carry on.
The issue of an LDS temple in the Lone Mountain area again up for debate, but now a date change for the planning meeting from April 9th to May 14th.
I'm not really surprised that they moved it back because they tried to wear us down and people don't show up the next meeting or the next meeting.
Katrina Corsi, along with other residents and members of the Rural Preservation Association, expressing frustration with the meeting being moved back. Tonight, they say they still feel as though the church hasn't acknowledged their concerns.
You know, we have height restrictions. We have size restrictions. We don't have street lights.
Those restrictions are acknowledged in a new 29-page report submitted for the proposed temple. The interlocal agreement mentioned in the findings section as being explicit, saying those restrictions exist continuing. However, the interlocal agreement is silent in regarding amending the general plan or rezoning to allow civic uses such as government facilities, schools, and religious facilities. But what does that mean? Lee Dusababek, who was involved with the interlocal agreement's writing, says that interpretation goes around the document's original intent.
You would just know that a 215-foot tall church with over 500 parking spots does not fit into this area.
Now, the LDS stake president for the Lone Mountain area responded to our question about this date move and growing.
Just before he talks about the state president, the guy in the background with the sunglasses and the shaved head looked like he was ready to mess someone up, and I wouldn't want to mess with him. He looked tough.
That's right. Don't mess with
Professional.
Vegas either.
Don't mess
That's
with Vegas.
exactly
Apparently,
right.
I'm learning very quickly.
Concerns,
Yep.
saying in part, we are aware of the request for an abeyance of the land use application for the proposed Lone Mountain Temple to May 14th. He continued saying, as the land use process moves forward, there will be ongoing evaluation of ways to try and address concerns.
He said nothing. It's essentially where we're at with that. So on the 20th of April, the residents chose to fly a balloon, and you covered this a lot, didn't you, Rebecca?
Yeah, I did, because I said, you know what they did in Cody? I said to the residents, they put a crane up to the height of where the steeple would be so that everybody could see it. It's a way to explain that even if you don't live right next door, you are going to be impacted, because again, just residents there, how are they going to know what's happening? So I said, you guys might want to think about doing something like this. And they did. They flew a balloon. And I would like to point out, even before we go to this clip, this temple is special in the area that it wants to build. This is an actual, like a rural preservation area. You saw that woman, it said president under her name. There is an association. This is a protected area with legally protected zoning for no sidewalks, no curbs, dark skies. This is not just a random neighborhood. They have signs that say rural protected area. This is already locked down, and the temple is trying to come in here. So this is why this group is able to mobilize so quickly, because they already have a preservation organization that has been there for years as far as the zoning and the protection in place.
We've got ED in the comments saying the spirit and intent of the interlocal agreement that was referenced in that news clip was to protect the area and maintain its rural character. And so the church saying, well, it doesn't say in the interlocal that you can't, make exceptions for religious buildings. It's like, well, yeah, it doesn't say in the Bible, or it certainly doesn't say in the New Testament, that you shouldn't be gay. But a lot of Christians have no drama with, making Jesus anti-gay. So let's not put too much stock in what things don't say, and let's look at the intent of the document, shall we? I didn't make that point very well, but I think you all knew what I was trying to say. Sometimes when a document is silent on something, that's not always going to be to your benefit. So, yeah, let's look at the residents flying a balloon. It's very lovely. Actually, I really like this as an idea. Here we go.
If you were driving in the West Las Vegas Valley today, you might have seen a 7-foot helium balloon take its maiden voyage. Residents of the Lone Mountain area bought this balloon as a protest. The white balloon, which is 7 feet in diameter, hovering 216 feet above the neighborhood, shows the height of the proposed temple for the Church of Jesus Christ and Latter-day Saints. Some residents say they are worried over the impact the temple will have in the community, but add they have no problem with members of the LDS faith.
We need to let people know that this project just doesn't fit the community. We love our LDS neighbors, but this project, it just doesn't fit.
Leadership for the LDS Lone Mountain Stake have said their congregation wants the temple to meet the demands of their 3,000 members who also live in the area.
That guy in the cowboy hat, was that not the most rural Nevada thing you've ever
If you were
seen?
driving in the West...
That's right.
Right?
The area is rural, the people are rural, and they moved
was
there
a
for
horse
that
behind it.
reason. And they set up all the infrastructure there legally to maintain that environment.
So look at the panorama that you see
Yeah.
there, all the buildings, nice, low, and look at where that balloon is. Look at how tall the temple would sit on that site. It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
Obscenely high for that area indeed. Yes, Elijah. Yes, it is. It's obscenely high. Doug Vincent points out 3,000 members, of which 250 have temple recommends. Very good point. The church likes to... That number's overinflated for two reasons, as Doug points out. The church will tell the news media that, oh, right, okay, we've got 3,000 members in the area. Okay, so that's people on record. So let's go with like 13% of that. So, there's 330 members in the area, say, of which possibly, only 250 have temple recommends at a push.
Yeah.
So they need to stop putting these big numbers out that just simply aren't true. I was chatting to someone earlier about in the UK, they claim 188,000 members in the UK, but when they report to the Charity Commission the number of volunteers they have readily available, they cite 25,000. And what else does that number represent other than the number of active members that they can call upon to do charitable work? So the church actually only has 25,000 active members in the UK. They claim 188,000 in all their media about, oh, we need a third temple because there's 188,000 of us. There's not. The same with this. And they're telling the news, and the news are reporting it because they know no better, because they don't know to challenge the church's figures, because you assume an organization like that will give you something honest, I guess.
Well, and other religions do report, people are self-reporting, and they do keep track, and they do report faithfully. So, and I have talked to people about the Vegas temple, people who are there in the area, and they say, of course, like almost every temple I know of, it's very underutilized, hard to staff, sessions not full. So again, people are asking, why do we need this other temple?
Very true. Right. Let me see if I can find how to make this work again. There we go. So the church sponsored a petition. This is also new information here that has not been reported on yet. I was sent this during the week. Me and Rebecca have been texting back and forth all week as people send us just excellent stuff. And you know me, I love to put the sources for everything in the description. But on this episode, unfortunately, I can't give you the sources for every letter that I've shown, because some of them have been sent to me directly or forwarded to me from when they were sent to this person by the church. So a lot of this stuff doesn't have like a link you can click, but there are still quite a few links you can click in the description to see these news articles, etc. But the church has sponsored a petition, which is interesting, because the Sky Canyon stake say between now and the 5th of May at the Azure and Elkhorn church buildings, individuals in attendance will have the opportunity to sign a paper petition to support the Lone Mountain Temple. The paper petition is a tangible way for our legal representatives to demonstrate the support of citizens living in neighborhoods close to the temple. And those legal representatives, again, just to remind you, are the law firm that we mentioned earlier. What are they called, Rebecca? Oh, you're muted.
I'm muted. I'm pulling an RFM. Kempfer and I can't even
Crowell.
remember. Crowell. That's
Kempfer and Crowell. Yeah. So Kempfer and Crowell are these legal representatives they're talking about. We invite all stake members 18 and above to sign this paper petition. It's important to note that the paper petition is separate and even more necessary than any other online or comment card you may have already filled out. Even if you've already filled out an online petition or comment card, we invite everyone to sign the paper petition as well. Participating in all 3 separate petitions, online, paper, and comment card, can show public support for the Lone Mountain Temple. Any members of the Indian Springs or BT branch are welcome and invited to participate and sign the petition, but it will not be held actively by their branch. Each ward has been assigned a ward petition leader. Please contact your ward petition leader if you have any questions or need to schedule a time to sign the paper petition. Amber Stewart is the stake petition coordinator and can be reached below for any questions. So the church has gone beyond now suggesting to people that they reach out and support, suggesting to people that they turn up, that they write comments, that they write emails. They are actively sponsoring and hosting petitions. They are making church assignments for people to have petitions, and they are putting paper petitions in their buildings. Now, Landon points out something very interesting in the comments here, and I think it's worth mentioning. I thought churches could not be used for political purposes. I'm being the ignorant Brit, wouldn't know, but Rebecca, is that the case in America? You can't use a church for a religious purpose?
Yeah, supposedly that is the case because that could take away your tax exempt status if you use your influence in a political way. But there must be wiggle room because the LDS Church definitely got involved in Prop 8 years ago, which was in California. It was the Defense of Marriage Act. It was to stop any kind of same-sex marriage. And they definitely, through contributions and soliciting contributions from members, I live in Utah, and at my church meeting, I was asked if I would get on a bus down to California so that I could canvass, that I could stand in front of the temple and get information out and very actively get involved in the political process in another state. So there's precedence for this. I guess it's just kind of.
But then we see this classic Mormon table set out under a picture of Christ with paper petition to be signed by individuals to support the temple. So there's very clear usage of church property, equipment, church volunteers to support a political process, if I'm not overstating that.
Well, they said in that letter that there was someone who had a calling to oversee. I don't think they used the word calling, but they said, did they say someone has been called assigned? Yeah.
There's a stake coordinator.
Yes. So definitely through the organizational structure of the church, there is someone that's over this endeavor that you could call to find out more information. So that does sort of seem to indicate that the church is, they've organized it, they're behind it.
Elijah Hawaii is saying, in terms of supporting one political candidate or another, it's a big no-no, but to support propositions, etc., apparently that's a bit more iffy. And I love the wiggle room that exists in America for churches when they just they use the First Amendment as a battering ram to get anything they want, basically. That's I don't know. I find that quirk of religious freedom in America quite strange. I've been talking to people about it today. It's a bit alien to me as a Brit, because I was explaining to someone that in Norway, for example, in other parts of Europe, the Jehovah's Witnesses in Norway, I believe, lost some of their rights to tax-free status or some of their state benefits as a religion, because their practice of shunning essentially applied to children, and that was against child protection laws. So the Norwegian government went, you can still be Jehovah's Witnesses, you can still practice your religion, you can do all this sort of stuff, but we don't have to support or provide you with tax benefits, etc. I will post a link to that in the description so you can get the full story of that, so I'm not misrepresenting any of the facts, but from memory, that's kind of what went down. So,
and then correct me if I'm wrong, but they have stopped the shunning practice now.
I did not know.
I saw an article or a video on that, and somebody correct me if I misunderstood it, that shunning is not happening in the same way that it was. And that was just recently. How interesting if those two things are related.
Interesting. Correlation does not equal causation, as we keep saying, but it could be interesting to see if they are related. The church then on the 7th of May is holding a virtual forum on land use hosted by Francis Allen Pelensky. How lovely. But only the first 1,000 people can go. What do you think about that, Rebecca?
Well, as I understand it, it was not supposed to be virtual. It was, supposed to be this meeting so you could find out. And then suddenly all the residents are sending me this, this flyer here where now it is virtual and only 1,000 people can go. And the questions are to be submitted ahead of time. So I feel like the LDS members, of course, outnumber, the residents. And so I feel like, the inbox might be stuffed with a certain kind of question, and maybe the residents won't get the chance or the visibility that they might have been able to have, hopefully, if they were to go to an actual meeting. So I don't know. We'll have to see how it plays out.
Well, here's the thing. I'm just grabbing the Jehovah's Witness Norway ruling just to make sure that I get that correct. But this hasn't replaced the meeting on the 14th. I believe it's a supplementary meeting, as far as I understand.
Yeah, no, it's supplementary, but I think it was supposed to still be in person, and then they possibly, but no, it's not just that meeting on the 14th is a planning and zoning meeting, and it's always set on the schedule. So no.
But this virtual forum is probably going to get stuffed with church members. The church will have their people signing up, so the first 1,000 are all members of the church, and then the councilwoman will be able to go back and go, oh, look at all this lovely public support that there is for this temple. And, it won't necessarily be a representative voice that they are hearing at this meeting, shall we say.
Correct.
But there is still the 14th of May, new date for the planning meeting. So put that in your calendars, everyone. Again, I'm not flying to Nevada, but if you are in the area, let us know how it goes. And let us know what happens. So we're going to keep our ears to the ground, and we can do a bit of back and forth. I can come on to Mormonish and talk about this later, I'm sure, and we'll just keep
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if I could explain just a little bit about what this meeting is about. So when I talked about codes being changed before residents were even aware, the area where the temple is going to be built is zoned residential, and a temple of that size, with all of its infrastructure, cannot be built there. So because it's residential, so it could be built in an area that's zoned civic. So I think Landon's chiming in here. So long before, but there was also something in the civic bylaws that said you couldn't build something of that size. So what happened is, long before anybody was aware of the temple, some of those early meetings, that was changed. Now in a civic zoning, you can build something that size. However, there's an interlocal agreement that says, no, you can't. And there's debate over that, as you saw in that news story. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to change the zoning from residential to civic, and hoping that the changes that were put in place early on, before residents were even aware, will make it possible to pass the temple through. So it's it's a little complex. We did a whole episode on Lone Mountain, if anybody wants to check it out on Mormonish. But this meeting on the 14th, I'm so self-promotional. I don't have snacks, but I promote myself.
No, that's fine. Send me the links. I'll put them in the description so people can check them out.
Exactly. This meeting on the 14th is all about the Planning and Zoning Board making that change to pave the way. Because as it is now, it's residential. Nothing could ever be built there. If it's changed to civic, based on these changes that happened before a couple months ago, it could happen if the interlocal agreement is interpreted that way. And that's also up for debate. So it's very complex.
There's a lot more going on.
Yeah.
But let's have a look at the church's other position on the external visage of temples, as one could say. In an article about the angel Moroni and why some temples have it and some temples don't, the church said this: while the angel Moroni statue occupies a prominent place on many temples throughout the world, symbolizing the restoration of the gospel of Jesus Christ, it is not a requirement of temple design. Some temples may include the statue, while others may not. And this is the key bit. A temple's design, both internal and external, is secondary to its primary purpose, which is for people to draw closer to God and his Son Jesus Christ by participating in sacred ceremonies that teach of God's plan and unite families forever. A temple's design, both internal and external, is secondary to its primary purpose. So the church itself admits that the design of the temple, the height of the steeple, what it's made of, doesn't matter compared, or is secondary, just to be clear, is secondary to what goes on inside. What happens outside is not as important as what happens inside. And so this is the place the church should be willing to compromise. This is the place where they've said that it's not as important, as long as they get enough endowment rooms, as long as they get a celestial room of sufficient size, as long as they get enough changing space, as long as they get everything you need, a baptismal font, all the sort of stuff that you need, they have no need to quibble about how tall a steeple is. It is not doctrinally essential. It is not essential for religious observance. I don't know why I don't know why the church is fighting these fights it doesn't need to fight. I don't know why it's doing this to itself, giving itself all this bad PR. It doesn't need it. It doesn't need to generate it. They could just turn up and be a good neighbor to begin with, rather than trying to plop a pre-designed temple from somewhere else in the country. They could just spend a little bit more of their money, design something that is genuinely sympathetic to the landscape, like they've done in Birmingham and like they'll do in other places where they don't get away with this crap. They could actually just spend that little bit of time, come into the neighbors, listen to their concerns, adjust, and as long as they get what they need on the inside, it is secondary what the temple looks like on the outside. Thus endeth my lecture. Rebecca, what are your closing thoughts on that?
That was a great lecture. No, and I'd like to give a shout out to one of our viewers, Logan, who picked up that phrase. He saw that being described on a program called Ward Radio, which is a faithful program, and they were talking about.
We don't say that name here.
Yeah. And I'm so sorry.
I'm joking.
Anyway, it was very helpful of him to find that statement, and also to show the residents that statement that it is not important to have that steeple. My co-host Logan Landon made the joke, well, maybe they will start putting some of their more important ordinances rooms way up top, right? At the very tip top of the steeple. And in that case, they could say that they needed it. But you're absolutely right, Nemo. We ask that question all the time. There are places that these temples could be built where they would fit in, where they would be welcomed, where there would be none of this pushback or controversy. In Cody, as you described, the prefab pieces of the temple have been sitting there on a member's land long before they even made the announcement to the community that the temple was going in. It's there, it's ready just to be tipped up, a tip-up temple. And again, no wonder the residents feel sort of betrayed, sort of overlooked, and there's no reason for that. And the end result is the divisiveness and the dividing of these towns. Some of them probably will not recover. In Cody and Heber, which have been fighting, and when I say fight, that's not what I mean. What I mean is they're standing up for their town. They're saying, we welcome you here. Please adhere to our laws, our structures that are in place. Please build where, respect our town and what we have in mind for our town. So fight maybe is the wrong word. But they've been doing this for much longer, and there are hard feelings on both sides. And it's really, if the temple, whether it's built or not, I don't know if those feelings will ever change. And it should be about people, should be about community, and trying to force these temples into places they don't belong. It destroys community.
Well, it's like the church can't understand that it is better to have people want your temple there than to force your temple down people's throats. It is better for PR. It is better for neighbor relations. The church wants to cry about how persecuted it is. Don't do crap like this if you want to have good relationships with your neighbors. The people don't like Mormons in this town. Why? Because we built a 215-foot spire and none of them wanted it. Oh, okay. Well, I kind of get a little bit why they resent your building now. Instead, they could have come to town and they could have gone, look, we want to put one of our beautiful temples here. It will have a gorgeous manicured lawn. It will fit into the space. It will be an addition to your town. You'll love it. And then when the people go, no, we don't love it, you go, oh, okay, well, what would make you love it? Mm-hmm. But it's this idea that I seem to be picking up, that they have rights. The church has rights. Mm-hmm. And if they don't exert those rights to their fullest at all times, those rights will be taken away from them. It's a slippery slope to complete loss of religious freedom because, we didn't exert our rights to their fullest one time. It's like, well, no, you just played nicely. The law is there to protect you if people are being unfair, but no one's being unfair here. You're coming in with an unreasonable request that's outside of zoning by a factor of 5. In some places, 5 times taller than anything else. And you're going, oh no, they're being mean to us. They're not being mean to you. You don't need to rely on religious law. You don't need to sue towns. You just need to listen and be a good neighbor. And that will give the church better PR. It will give the church, it could even bring people to the church. Mm-hmm. Could even be a missionary tool. Yeah. People actually want to find out what this building is rather than resenting it. And they ask, and they could end up joining. Like, there's so many benefits to not behaving this way that I can't understand why they think they need to behave this way. It just makes no sense to me. Rebecca, have you got any insights into why they're acting like this?
I don't. It just seems like a total lack of self-awareness. And I think about all of our residents that we've worked with, especially Cody and Heber. They start out by saying, we're church-going folk, the residents, and this is a church, and we'll work together and we'll figure this out. We'll explain to them our zoning, and then we'll kind of come to a compromise. They start out like that. We're all church-going folk of different denominations. Within a month or so, they're saying to us, this doesn't seem like a church. What is this? Who are these people? Why did their lawyers come to our meeting and threaten to sue and sue and sue, like in Cody, 4 lawsuits? It's not a church. What is this? And so you're absolutely right. Again, Nemo, this is a really great opportunity for positive PR, to work with people, to bring a beautiful building to a place where everyone wants it. I don't know why it's not happening. I can't.
They could have people as excited as people can get for change, because change happens and some people don't like change. But if they pick the right spot and they pick the right people and they pick the right place, they could have people excited to have a temple come to town. It could be the exciting thing they think it is if they play their cards right. But I think Thunder Snow sums it up best. They don't care. And that upsets me. It does. It upsets me to see my church behave this way. That's how I look at it. My church that I'm a member of, to see them behaving this way on the international stage, to see them behaving this way towards people that are not of our faith, bullying them and pushing them with lawsuits and just trying to get their way. It's almost like they've forgotten what it's like to be driven out of town and to be not welcome somewhere. So they're trying to reinstigate not being welcome somewhere so they can get that familiar feeling back or something. Are they sadomasochistic about this? They seem determined to cause themselves difficulty. I said to someone earlier today. Oh, sorry, go on.
Oh, I was just going to say the residents definitely bring this up, that the members will say, our ancestors have faced it's that persecution complex, and they do believe it's happening again. And there's also this feeling that whatever it takes to get the temple, whatever it takes, because once it's built, everyone in the town will understand the blessing of it. And I really feel like they genuinely believe that, the members. But of course, the other residents are going, what exactly will that be? There's this wake of, these terrible feelings. But I think the residents feel at any cost, this must be accomplished.
Well, because the only benefit locals get that aren't paid up members of the club is the external, the aesthetics of the temple. That's all they get from this. And if they don't like where it is, and if they don't like how tall it is, and if they don't like how it looks, they literally get nothing out of this arrangement. They get a load of disruption during construction, and then they're stuck with this mausoleum to Mormonism in their back garden, just taking up space and ruining their view.
Right. And even more than that, it does not pay any property tax. So there's no benefit in that way to the community. And then also, as far as even the look of it, the lighting, it is a big issue. It really is an issue to wildlife, to migrating birds, just a disruption.
Dark
so when you
skies.
talk about the benefits, and people do say, oh, your property values will go up. Well, that also means, because the church does tend to then build very high-end homes around it. So what also happens is your property tax goes up. If you were planning to live in your rural neighborhood for the rest of your life, the temple comes in, your property taxes go up. And we've seen this, $1,000 a month. Can you afford to continue to live there? It just isn't what it seems on the surface. And I think a lot of the residents recognize that. And that's why they're saying, please, let's work this out. Let's put this somewhere else. You're welcome here, but please, let's put it somewhere where it belongs.
Yeah. Well, I think on that note, it's a good place to wrap this up. So thank you very much, everyone, for watching. You can check out Rebecca's podcast with Landon, Mormonish. There'll be links in the description. It's excellent. I really enjoyed my appearance on Mormonish when I went on recently. We talked all about how the church doesn't really do as much charity work as it would like to have you believe. So aren't we a joyful bunch? If you like this video, if you like this kind of stuff, this kind of research, make sure you hit subscribe. If you want to fund this research, again, there's links in the description. Become a monthly supporter. That's always very much appreciated. But share this video with someone that you think will enjoy it, or you think will find it useful. Share it with people that you think will want to spread this story to make sure that the church doesn't get away with this kind of behavior, and that people know exactly how they're acting as far as we've been able to tell the story. And if you can't do any of that, you can't be bothered, just hit that little thumbs up, just hit that little like button just on your way out. that would be excellent. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care. I will see you next week. Bye-bye.